Hey guys, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema, and today I'm returning to a segment that I've been wanting to return to for a while, and that's the segment My Favorite Movies, where, as the title suggests, I review one of my favorite movies. And the film up to bat for today is Blowout. This came out in 1981 and was directed by Brian De Palma. So I've loved movies my entire life, but it's really only in the past, 2 or 3 years where I'd really consider myself, more of a cinephile, just in terms of how often I'm watching movies and how diverse those titles are. And as such, I only really discovered Brian De Palma's work within the last couple years, but the more I watch it, the more, I really appreciate his work. I think of that 1970s, film school brat generation, Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, Scorsese, and De Palma. I think De Palma is easily the most underrated and might just be my favorite out of that group in general. I love the way that he uses his visual style to not only enhance how effective the story is, but also to sort of expose the artificiality behind filmmaking devices that he's using. And sometimes this is even used as a criticism of his work, because when you watch his films, you're very aware of the artificiality, you're very aware that you're watching a movie, but this is of course completely intentional. By using all these bombastic devices, the split screens, the split diopters, the 360s, all that, he really kind of exposes the artistic minutia behind what makes art effective. And Blowout, I think, is definitely one of his most metatextual works, and the one that really pushes the most at kind of the darkness behind filmmaking. The film, of course, stars John Travolta, who plays Jack, a sound man for B-horror movies, and one night when he's out recording new sounds, he records the sound of a car driving off the road and into the river. He saves a person in the car, Sally, played by Nancy Allen, but he's unable to save the other passenger, who we later learn is the likely would-be president of the United States. And as Jack examines his recording of the accident, he starts to become suspicious about what actually happened that night, and makes it his mission to get to the bottom of this conspiracy. Now, I want to say right off the bat, I think that De Palma is clearly doing something very metatextual with this film, because the opening scene is essentially a prank on the audience. On the special features, De Palma did an interview with Noah Baumbach, and it's a fantastic interview. I should highly suggest checking it out. But in this interview, he had a quote which I really loved, which is basically something to the effect of, when you start a movie, the audience is ready for essentially anything. So why would you open the movie with a boring helicopter shot of the city that you're setting the story in? And I just love that sort of, subversive mindset that he has. But sort of to that effect, Blowout opens with a shot that essentially looks like it's a Halloween ripoff, or even like a Maniac ripoff. It's like a POV shot of a killer looming outside some college dorms. And of course, then we get the big reveal that all of this is completely artificial, and what we've been watching is just a part of one of the movies that Jack is working on. And I just love that despite that this is supposed to be a really, cheap imitation, sort of 80s B-slashers, De Palma can't really help himself behind the camera. He can't help but make this scene still look really, really good and well shot. But what he and cinematographer Vilmos Sigmund, kind of reveal with this is that, it's setting you up for the idea of the artificiality of film. It lets you know what the film is going to deal with, both literally and thematically. So after this, Jack has to record some sounds for a new film that he's working on. Basically, the director says that he needs some new wind sounds, so he goes out to record these. And this is where the plot of the film really starts to get going, but also where De Palma's style really starts to show off. This sequence of Travolta, out on the bridge recording sounds contains one of my favorite split diopters in a De Palma movie, that of course being the one with the owl. Now, once Jack has rescued Sally from the car and the accident has happened and everything, they're at the hospital, and this is where Jack really starts to realize that there's an attempt to cover things up. Something's not really right about the details that he's hearing about the accident. Basically, an associate of the governor asks, Jack if he can refrain from mentioning that he rescued Sally, or that Sally was even in the car in the first place. Which I think is a great way of kind of getting the audience really intrigued in this, because, political assassinations were very salient in the US, especially at that particular time, and I just think it lends itself to a thriller movie like this so well. And of course, De Palma isn't just making reference to real events like the Kennedy assassination, but he's also, making reference to other films that deal with the same subject, most notably Michael Antonioni's Blow Up, and Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation. which these three movies together are seen in kind of an unofficial trilogy of sort of paranoia thrillers. It's also at this hospital scene where we really start to see the relationship between Jack and Sally start to blossom, which I do think is key to the emotion of the film, where it eventually goes. And I think Travolta and Nancy Allen are both really brilliant in these performances because they both have surfaces that they, put on really well, but they also subvert these surfaces and kind of reveal more about the characters just as brilliantly. Travolta has this very everyman, nice surface that he puts on, and really kind of genuinely is. But at the same time, there is this kind of more sleazy Hitchcock protagonist element to his character. That's really interested in De Palma's interest of voyeurism. And Sally might be even more of an interesting subversion because on the surface, she's not the brightest character in the world, but she's really, likable, charming. But the subversion with her character has to do with how she ended up in the car in the first place. And once we kind of realize who she is and how she ended up in the car, the film's focus about the sort of economic and political anxieties start to really come into focus. We see that Sally is kind of exactly the kind of person who would have benefited from Governor McRyan's election. He was kind of seen, as a bit more of a reformist candidate as opposed to the status quo. And as such, Sally kind of becomes a figure for what the political establishment is trying to cover up in both a literal and a metaphorical way. So as the movie goes on, uncovering this conspiracy just becomes, basically the entire world to Jack. And once he sees the evidence of this, that he's stopping at nothing to prove it, and the way he wants to prove it really ties into De Palma's more metatextual ideas about the, filmmaking process. Jack takes his audio that he recorded and he starts to sync it up with photos taken by a photographer in the area at the time. And this is really where Blowout starts to combine ideas of Blow Up and The Conversation. Because, The Conversation more being about audio, Blow Up being more about, visual aids as it has to do with a photographer. And this is where Blowout, I think, really sets itself apart in, film history because it's kind of, it's a celebration of the medium. It's showing like the great effects of what film can do, what they can definitively prove. But at the same time, the film takes such pleasure in kind of destroying this idealistic image. We see Travolta putting the images with the sound, and once we see the full picture, we see that he's right. It clearly, the tire was clearly shot out by an assassin. And that's the beauty of this art. It's so definitive. We can see it. But at the same time, the rest of the film, like I said, is so dedicated to just showing the more corrosive aspects of this art form. Maybe my favorite shot in any De Palma film takes place when Travolta has realized that somebody's onto him because somebody started to erase his tapes in his sort of sound lab. And he's going through all of the tapes in his lab, just trying, slowly realizing what's happening. And as this is happening, there's basically a 360 shot where Travolta keeps, the camera's moving and Travolta keeps coming in and out of frame. Another catalyst for this idea of the artifice of cinema being torn down is the eventual relationship that happens between Jack and Sally. As the film goes on, they go from strangers to acquaintances to friends to possibly lovers by the end of the film. It's never really explicitly, kind of said, but it's heavily implied. The movie hints that this, of the sort of beautiful prospect of what their relationship could be, but heavily implies that this is only leading to disaster. And I think the score really does this. The love theme in particular between Jack and Sally is really hauntingly beautiful, but that's the thing, is like it implies this wistfulness about their relationship, but at the same time it really heavily implies that something bad, really bad, is going to happen. One other brilliant performance in the film that I haven't talked about yet is John Lithgow, who I think is a really incredible actor, especially in his work with De Palma. But he basically plays the assassin, the guy who shot out the tire originally and is now trying to cover up the conspiracy. So he knows about Sally and he's trying to hunt her down. But rather than immediately go out and try and kill her, he wants to make sure that when he does get her, it looks like an accident. So he starts basically just killing women in the area who look very similar to Sally, so that when he kills her, it'll just sort of look like, the work of a local maniac. And these sequences are thrilling. Not only is Lithgow so menacing, but the way that De Palma frames him, especially in split diopter shots, really emphasize what a presence he is. So late in the film, Jack and Sally have a plan to, sort of deliver the tapes to a news outlet who will sort of expose the story to the public. But of course Lithgow is hunting down both of them, especially Sally, as this happens. And Jack is listening to Sally through a microphone, and once he realized that Lithgow has found her, he basically starts running all over the city trying to find her, trying to make sure that he can save both her and the tape. And I love that he only really knows where she is because of the microphone that he has. He basically syncs up sounds that he hears through the recording to kind of what he's seeing. It's much like the way that he kind of put the tapes together. You can sort of he hears the fireworks in the background, and he's able to sort of locate where Sally might be in this giant crowd based on that. So in this next section, I really can't talk about the ending of this film and why I love it so much without kind of spoiling it a little bit. So I'll put a little spoiler bar here for this section if you haven't seen the film. But if you have seen the film, I do want to discuss this because you know why. It's fantastic. Now, once Travolta finally finds Lithgow and he's killing Sally, he is able to pull Lithgow off of her and eventually kill him, but he realizes that he's too late. She's already dead. And not only that, but he's also thrown the tapes off of the building and into the river. De Palma then does another one of my favorite 360 shots with Travolta holding Sally in his arms, as it sort of circles around them, and you see all of the 4th of July like fireworks in the background, really kind of painting a beautiful picture about this political lie triumphing. This is my favorite way that De Palma really ties together those themes of the artifice of filmmaking and the artifice of American democracy. And if that wasn't devastating enough, De Palma puts the cherry on top with one of my favorite endings of all time. As we hear Jack and Sally's love theme one more time, we also hear that Jack is listening back to the audio that he recorded of Sally's murder. And as we hear her final scream, we then cut to that scream being used for the sound in one of those shitty B movie, in the exact shitty B movie that Travolta's character was working on at the start. The painful reality of that trauma that he experienced just echoes again and again because of the process of filmmaking. It's an extremely bleak ending, of course, but it's so powerful emotionally. I just don't know if I've ever been as blown away by an ending to a film as I was by this one the first time I saw it. I know that De Palma has many cult classics out there, and I do love pretty much all of them. I think, he's a fantastic filmmaker, but this is my favorite film that he's ever done. I think it's his masterpiece. If I am rating this, of course, it's a super easy 5 stars. On a lot of days, this is probably a top 10, top 5 movie of all time for me. I just really, really love it. I've seen it like 4 or 5 times at this point, and it honestly only gets more thrilling every time when you know that ending is coming. So yeah, anyway, that's my review for Blowout. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was a bit of a longer review, but I really wanted to take my time with this one and really write out my thoughts, go as in-depth as I thought I could possibly go. So just let me know if you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed putting this video together. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please like it down below and subscribe to the channel if you want. I'm going to be on a bit of a hiatus for the next week or so. From like the 22nd to 29th, I'll be on a camping trip with my fiance and her family. I will try and get a Barbie Oppenheimer review up before I leave, though. I really want to do that because I'm seeing the double feature tomorrow night. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys in the next one. See ya.